All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is Thursday, February 1st of 2024 here. Looking ahead, we have a four-game NBA main slate later this evening. I know golf teed off earlier this morning. Good luck to all of you in your golf contest this weekend. And then we have a two-game NHL main slate later tonight as well. So should have DFS all day for you guys. Thursdays are one of the best days of the week for DFS, in my opinion, especially during baseball season. Golf's going on. You got, usually split day MLB, and then you have, your night sports. So I always love sweating DFS throughout the entire day here. So that makes Thursdays one of my favorite days. But for those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew, one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS related questions. You get your questions in one of three ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord, you want to get access to that channel, there is a link in the description of this video. You get access to our similar channels, individual sport channels, and you get access to the rest of the SaberSim team here. So I can't say enough good things about the Discord. But with that said, we're going to get the app pulled up here. And we are going to jump right in. So starting with questions that came in Discord, as always here, looks like there were quite a few follow-ups here yesterday. Looks like Henry jumped in. Appreciate you, Henry. Answering SD Lancaster. Looks like our first question came in from J. Sams Jr. So we're going to start there, and then we will keep the show rolling. So question says, how can I use the Sims to determine how many shot attempts a player will have? Also, how many shot attempts a player will have from beyond the arc? This is for prop betting purposes. So I don't think that type of data is in here. So any stat specific data is available on the pro and up subscriptions here, and you can see them beyond percentiles. Minutes, points, 2-pointers, 3-pointers, rebounds, offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, and turnovers. So those are the detailed stats that we provide as far as shot attempts and 2-shot field goal attempts, 3-shot field goal attempts. Those are not available here. So unfortunately, not going to be able to help you out in that department. All right. Next question here from Interrogator. Question says, when loading multiple, say 5 different single entry / 3 max entries from a single build, what's the best process? Run a single contest sim, an adjustment unique for all of them, and then save. Run a contest sim for each and save individually. How do you get a good portfolio? Okay, really good question. So there's kind of two schools of thought here, okay? And let's just run a build. Let's run like 500 lineups. And then I will show you guys two different ways to do this, right? One of them is where you use a single contest sim and, let that be the contest sim that you use for all of your contests, or you do them individually, right? Two schools of thought. Really just comes down to personal preference. How specific do you want to be, etc., right? So if I load up CSV for tonight, I go over to my build, and let's say that if I go over to my lineups, sort by entries here. So, I have a number of single entries, right? 1, 2, or say I'm doing single entry in 3 max, right? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I have 11 single entries, right? Well, maybe I just want to use the highest dollar single entry. So I use the $12 pick and roll. And then I create a contest sim for this. And then basically I go in here, I set my number of lineups. I think it was 12. And then I run the contest sim for that one contest. And I allow that contest sim to be used when I use the contest sim metrics from that one contest sim for all of my single entries, right? And I'm basically saying, hey, I just want to pick the highest dollar single entry, or the one I care about the most, and let those results go for all of the contests. So I can't say that that's the best practice, but it can be good practice if you're in a tight window here. So like yesterday, the Zion news broke kind of late, close to lock, even though the game was later in the evening. Say lock is at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time here tonight. And, the Pelicans played later in a later game window. Well, the Zion news broke kind of before slate lock. So if you could get that information in and get your lineups updated, that was beneficial, right? So in that moment, maybe running a single contest sim is going to be faster because you're in such a time crunch. I think he probably had, less than 5 minutes to react to that news appropriately. So I think it's okay to use one contest sim when you're in a time crunch. Okay. Now, optimal strategy is where you have, multiple contest sims here. So like right now I have 2 contest sims, right? I have the $12 and then I have the $2. So then when I run these, you get, well, first off, just remember you can create up to 10 contest sims total, right? So you can have 10 different contest sims set up. And then when you hit run contest sim, they're all going to run at the same time. Okay. So then right now it's processing, it's running all the individual contest sims for every lineup in your pool against the appropriate set of field lineups. And then when that finishes in your drop down here, you can see that you're going to have contest sim data for each contest sim, right? So the optimal strategy is to create individual contest sims, go into each one, sort by the appropriate metric, build one lineup. And then now that I have my one lineup for my single entry contest sim sorted by risk adjusted ROI here, I can go to save to my contest. I can only select the contest in question, save that one. You're going to see the source gets updated to build one here. And then I go back to the build. First thing I want to do is I want to trash this lineup, and I could click the trash icon in the build. I could right click on my lineups. If this is like a portfolio, maybe this is a 20 max, right? You want to trash them all at once. So I'm going to hit trash from all lineups. I'm going to trash that lineup. Basically, I don't want that lineup to be reused because maybe it was good for this contest sim. Well, hey, maybe it's also good for another one. Just to make sure I'm getting unique lineups, I'm going to take the extra step of trashing it here so it doesn't get recycled. If you care about that, which I personally do here, and which is what we recommend, is playing a unique lineup into every entry. And then from there, then I go and switch my contest sim that I'm sorting by, and I go to the $2, right? And then now I get a new lineup. And then I go and then I select that contest, and then I fill that one. And then you're going to see the timestamp updates, right? This was a minute later. Boom. Then now that one's filled. And then you would essentially go through that process for however many contest sims you have. So that is like the best strategy because you're being as specific as possible on a contest by contest basis. But it can be a little time consuming, right? If you have 10 contest sims and you're going through that cycle over and over again, if you're in a time crunch, it's going to be kind of hard. So I think that, using that as your baseline, the every contest sim option where you're filling, trashing, and then filling the next contest, unless you're in a time crunch, then just picking like a proxy contest sim and then using that just to make sure you get those lineups in, because there is nothing worse than not getting your lineups in. It doesn't matter if you're using projected score. It doesn't matter if you're using SaberScore. It doesn't matter if you're using a percentile. The absolute worst thing you can do is not get your lineups in on time. So get your lineups in regardless of the sorting metric you're using, and then even come back and then, refill it with the one you want and then get an updated set in, right? You can just overwrite it as many times as you want. So always make sure you get your lineups in, guys. All right. Okay, good question. Glad we covered that one. All right, another one coming at you. Can you go over how to get half/even/twice of the field at the player team stack levels? What markers in the sim do you look for when finding leverage points versus the field? Okay, good question. So the best thing to look at is typically pool exposure. So what pool exposure shows you is like, hey, right now, say I open this up, right? Say I'm looking at 20 lineups. I'm looking at a very small subset of my pool, right? So this is going to be, hey, in the top 20 lineups sorted by this metric, these are the best plays. But hey, across all of your entries, all of your pool lineups, the player came up in this many, right? So, Tobias Harris in 20 out of our top 20, but he's in 63% of our pool, right? So this pool exposure is going to be a better option to look at when trying to figure out leverages, right? So what I would suggest here, change the number of my lineups to match your pool. So it's going to be 500. And then go in here and sort by leverage. This is going to tell you your pool exposure leverage, right? So then now I can come in here, say, hey, who does SaberSim like the most? And then this is going to be G.G. Jackson. It's going to be Paul Reed. It's going to be Tobias Harris. Just looking at this, it looks like Memphis is going to be another value play. It looks like Joel Embiid is out because I'm pretty sure he got hurt in that game against the Warriors. So, Paul Reed shoots up. Tobias Harris shoots up. right? Looks like there's maybe even some value on Utah. So like, this is kind of a way of like, hey, what do I want to go look at for this slate, right? Because in my opinion, the high leverages are the plays that you care about. These are the plays that you're effectively rooting for. You're saying that, hey, on average, I have more of these players in my lineups than the average player does. So you want to make sure you agree with these plays, right? So this is a good opportunity to say, hey, let me go into Memphis. Why do we have so many Memphis players? And then you come in here and you see all these guys out, right? And you're like, oh, okay, I get it now, and then you come in and look and it makes some sense to you, right? I go to Philly. Oh, Embiid's out, right? Exactly like we were talking about. Okay, that opens up huge value on this team. Okay, got it. Go to Utah. Interesting. They just have like kind of some low salaries here. Some of these lower guys, like, decent plays, but also decent ownership. So they seem okay. Nothing crazy here, but looking at your leverages is going to be one way to do that. And then looking at it on your entire lineup pool level and then comparing, because what leverage is doing, it's looking at your exposure minus your ownership, and then it's returning a number, right? You can also inversely sort. I can look, hey, who do we not like, right? Okay, Scottie Pippen Jr. Hey, he's on Memphis. We were just talking about Memphis is a big value team, That's kind of interesting, right? Maybe that's an opportunity to look into. Hey, why do we like some Utah guys and not these other Utah guys, right? And you just start like going down this rabbit hole of like understanding a slate and figuring it out, right? So like the Memphis stuff, really interesting to me. The Utah stuff, really interesting to me. Like those are opportunities to say, hey, maybe I need to spend a little more time looking at this specific thing to make sure it makes sense to me what the builder is trying to do, right? And then you kind of go from there. But that's like kind of the rabbit hole you want to go down, and using those leverages at the top and bottom are going to help you, because remember, like mathematically, matching ownership is the most neutral thing you can do. Anything above or below that is going to be where you're rooting for, you're rooting against. Those are going to be the things that ultimately separate you from the rest of the field, is those plays that you have that the other players don't, or the plays that the other team has that you don't, right? And so just understanding those is super important. And then how do you get half, even, twice of the field? You just do that with min and max exposures. Nothing special there. You look at ownership, and then you come in here, like, say I'm looking at my top 20 lineups. Greg Jackson is 10% owned. Maybe that's too much leverage for me, right? So maybe I only want him at like 5x. So then I would go in here and I would set my max exposure to 50, right? And then now I'm less than, now I'm 5x the field, right? So always compare that to ownership. You can do that on any level. We don't have stack ownership, but what you can do is look at like stack pool exposure, and then just kind of see like if you agree with some of those things, and then kind of go from there. But since there isn't stack ownership for this, not as easy to go over, but also not as like relevant either. Okay. Next question here from Mike. Mike said, hello, office hours. I'm currently on the pro plan. Besides SaberScore, what other metrics would be useful when sorting for certain contests to get different and more diverse? I mean, honestly, I don't really try and overthink this. SaberScore is taking three variables into account. It's looking at projected score, it's looking at an ownership component, and it's looking at a percentile. Those are like the defaults, right? It's salary, it's ownership, it's projected score, it's percentiles. And SaberScore is using three of those. So I personally, don't think there's a lot like more to do there. But if you're on the pro and ultimate, which I know you said you're on the pro, you can mess around with custom metrics, right? You can go to this add custom lineup metric. And if you want to tweak something, if you want to mess around, what I always suggest doing is going to SaberScore, and then over here on the right, there's going to be an eye icon. You can click it. It will show you the variables in SaberScore. It'll pop up here. It'll say, hey, we're using this variable at this way. We're using that variable at that way. We're using this variable at this way. Use that as a baseline, and then either add variables, take variables away, change the weights. You can go a lot of different directions, but I like to use SaberScore as the baseline and then build from there. So if you're looking to do something different, I would probably recommend messing around with custom metrics. There's not a lot of guidelines there, mostly because custom metrics are more art than science, as far as, what you want to do with them. Okay, next question here from Bill's Nut. Question says, after running contest sims, sorting by risk-adjusted ROI, and adjusting min uniques, what are some other quick adjustments I can make to improve my NBA process for 2150 max? Also, is sorting by risk-adjusted ROI the best sorting method? I've heard others talking about sorting by cash rate or win rate and was wondering if there was a more optimal sort method. Okay, so as far as like tweaks you can do, I would really refer to like what we kind of just talked about is like, hey, when you've run your contest sim, when you've sorted by risk-adjusted ROI, which is our recommendation, when you've adjusted min uniques, come in here and make sure you agree with the players that you're the heaviest leveraged on. And then, the good thing about using min uniques is that it's going to organically adjust your min and max exposures, so you don't have to do it yourself. So like if I go here, right, let me just reset all these in case I made any adjustments. So I had one min unique, 20 lineups. I have 3 guys over 95%, another 3 guys over 70%, right? And then when I adjust this, to four min uniques, now I only have 2 guys at 70%. So instead of having 6 guys over 70%, I only have 2 now. The exposures are adjusting very, very naturally, right? And you can see these leverages come down from like 50 down to like 30s, etc. here, right? And then maybe you make some fine-tune adjustments. So what you're doing with min uniques is you're making the builder make tough decisions about who to keep in the lineups and who to move around, right? So like in this scenario, what's really interesting to me, right, is that if we look here, Keontae George is our 5th highest exposure at 75%. He's below all these other guys. But when we increase min uniques from 1 to 4, Keontae George is tied for the highest exposure on here, right? So like when you do this, you might be like, oh, Tobias Harris must be the best play of the game because he's in 100% of our lineups and nobody else is. But when you start to make the builder make tough decisions, it's actually saying, hey, we actually think Keontae George, you should keep the exposure to him and actually lower the exposure to Tobias Harris, to Paul Reed, to Greg Jackson, who went all the way from like 90 down to 45. So the builder's going to do that like in a very efficient way. And then if you have any last fine-tune adjustments that you want, then come in here and set like 1, 2, 3 max exposures. But I like that organic effect that you get from using this tool. Okay, next question. Would I be limiting my portfolio too much if I sorted by contest sim, risk-adjusted ROI, then filtered out cash percent under 40%? And win rate under 0.15. My dupes are still low according to the tools. So it really just comes down to how many lineups you end up filtering out. When you apply a filter, I like to say that, I don't like to get rid of like maybe more than like 20% of my lineups, like 10 to 20%, right? So I'm at like 500 and, I apply some type of lineup filter. I don't really want that lineup filter to cut my pool in half, right? I think that's like way too aggressive. I'd probably lax that filter a little bit. But if you're filtering out, 10% of your lineups with one filter and like 10% of your lineups with another filter, like I think that's pretty much okay, especially on like these classic slates. So I don't mind doing that at all. All right, next question. Is it better to adjust a player's projections to get him into your lineups or just set a min-max amount on the individual player you want to have? Okay, good question. Honestly, to me, guys, it depends what your goal is. And it depends why you're making the change, right? So in my opinion, why are you making this change, right? Do you just think this guy is a good play? If you just want to play this person, if you just think they're a good play, you have some conviction, just set a min-max exposure. Now, if you think this player's projection is wrong for some reason, and you just want to give the builder a more accurate input, then I would simply adjust the projection. So like maybe today, Keontae George projected for 21 minutes. Maybe for whatever reason, my research leads me to believe he's actually going to play 25 minutes. Now, obviously that would be good if he played more minutes than projected because most people are projecting him at this level. But I'm not coming at this from the angle that, hey, I want to play this person more because I think they're going to play more minutes. I'm coming at it from the angle of like, hey, I want to give the builder a more accurate projection. So, and then let the builder decide what to do. So like, say he was 1 point per minute for simple math, right? I would change his projection from 21 to 25. Now I wouldn't do anything beyond that. And then I would let the builder say, okay, now that this is the player's projection, how much do we want to put this player into your lineups? And, sometimes you're going to make an adjustment like this and the builder is still not going to give you very much exposure to the player. In my opinion, that's okay. You've given the builder a more accurate input. It has evaluated that input and still decided to play this player at a low exposure. I know that feels bad because you found something that you think is inefficient, but sometimes, that's letting the builder do its thing. Sometimes you're going to do this and the builder's going to like want to jam this player in. Then you need to make like a risk management decision. Like, okay, how strongly do I believe in this take? How firmly do I think this is actually going to happen? And honestly, sometimes, it's my recommendation. Say that you think that this guy's actually going to play like 25 minutes and he's at 21. I might just make it 23, where I'm just making a directionally accurate adjustment where I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to say, hey, I think it's going to happen this way and just kind of nudge the builder in a direction rather than be super specific, because if you're wrong and the builder just jams this player in, then, it's really going to hurt you. But if you're just trying to be directionally right, it's a little safer. It's a little bit better of like a risk management approach, in my opinion. All right, jumping over to the YouTube chat. Hiker Willie, in regards to players I have high exposure to and leverage, in order to decrease exposure, would it be better to lower projections or set a minimum exposure? My high owned plays seem to fail often. So sounds like you're probably like a risk averse person. I would crank up mini uniques to the max. I wouldn't even do one less than the max. I would crank it up as high as you can. And then I would probably go into your leverage. And then, your highest leverage plays, I would probably just set a couple max exposures and, just be very flat. You can even build with a global max exposure if you want. Click the gear icon. It's going to say set max exposure to blank for all players. And maybe, you just come at it with this very, very flat approach. So that's another option as well. If you're going to do that approach, what I would suggest doing is always sorting by my own and then just seeing like what the highest owned player is and just, maybe using that number, right? So if somebody's projected for 70% ownership and you're like, oh, I don't want to play a player more than 50%. Well, now you're already negative leverage on one of the highest owned plays on the slate. So you're basically saying, hey, I want to be neutral at most to the highest owned player and then just kind of trickle down from there, right? So that's another way to think about it. Okay, next question. If I enter 250 max contests, 150 mini max contests, you're saying 240 lineups, but my math says 300, but we'll figure it out. Is it better to build 240 lineups or do 150 and delete them and bring up a new 90? Or just put the same 150 into both contests? Thanks. Okay, so regardless of how many lineups you have, in my opinion, the way that we suggest you play is to enter a unique lineup into every entry you have. So for tonight, I have 181 entries. I'm going to build 181 lineups. That is just how we suggest doing that. I've seen, other people like Big T over at Run Pure, because I see your logo here, do it differently where, they have like one lineup in like a bungee contest where like if they hit, they really just crush. That approach is like a little more high variance, but if that's your style, then like that's your style. But if you're asking me, I'm going to say build a unique lineup for every entry you have and just use this number in the parentheses in the contest tab. Okay, question from James. How do I upload custom projections? Great question. So you just go to this upload button here, and then you can either upload a CSV, you can click on the cell in the top left corner, you can copy and paste, and then just make sure that the column headers match the appropriate columns here. So like sometimes if you have a certain verbiage for your projections, it's like FP for like fantasy points, the builder might not pick up on that automatically. So you just have to go into the column and then just match the appropriate one to the fantasy points, match the name or the player ID. You have a couple different options, and then click save. And then once you click save, that will populate in the My Projection column, and then you can even save that as a source projections. So if you're looking for a tutorial on that, go to Help, in the top right corner, you go down to Frequently Asked Questions, and then you go to Custom. So how to upload custom projections. We have a tutorial that shows you exactly how to do that, which I will drop in the chat for anybody who needs access to that video. But with that said, we're all caught up on questions in both the Office Hours channel and the YouTube chat. So appreciate you guys tuning in as always. And tomorrow will be Friday, last show of the week. We do this show Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So if you guys have questions ahead of the weekend, tomorrow is the day to get those questions in and get those questions answered. So until then, everybody, good luck. Take care. I'll see you all. Thanks. Bye.